He was supposed to be in Sunday school, and he knew that because he'd had a wash. It was the only day of the week that he did have a wash, and he was told that that was what he had to do. And if his mother and father told him that he had to do it, then he would have to do it. And so on a Sunday, he would be scrubbed clean, and he would have to go to Sunday school. Now, he had made his older brother angry, and here in the middle of 1820, he was finding it hard to tell his older brother that he had let his favourite pig out of the field, because he lived on a farm with his mother and father and older brother, and they had pigs to look after. Pigs to pen, pigs to wash, pigs to clean, pigs to make sure that they kept fit and healthy and fed them. And they weren't really supposed to have them as pets, but since they had nothing else, then they each had a favourite pig. And just to make his older brother angry, he'd let his older brother's favourite pig out of the field, and now he was hiding inside of the pen, washed but covered with all of the muck that was on the ground, all of the mud. It was a wide farm field, and there was a terrible smell in the air. You could hear his brother stamping around, screaming, yelling, shouting and crying. Because if he'd lost that favourite pig, then there would have been everything to pay for. He wouldn't go out ever. He would have to work twice as hard to make up for the money that they would have lost from the farm with not having a pig to take to slaughter. The boy, hiding inside of the pig pen, could see that there was an old suckler there, a huge old sow. And she had not 1, not 5, not 10, but 12 piglets all squeezing around her so that they could feed. The boy could feel all of the piglets as they were scratching around, and as they scratched around, they moved the mud and splashed his face and made his clothes even dirtier than he was already. He wondered what he could do. He looked, and pigs will pick up things and take them back inside of the pen to play with, and he could see that there was a scrubbing brush, an old scrubbing brush with 2 initials scratched into the back of it. He looked at it. Now, he didn't like schooling, and he didn't get an awful lot of it, but his father had said that he would be able to write his name if it was the last thing that he could do, because his own father, he could barely put a cross on anything, contracts that were signed from the farm. But he looked and he could see that the last letter, J, was the same as his surname, because that was his name. James. It was one of his father's jokes to call him the same as his father and his father before him, James Jr. Not 1, not 2, but 3 J's to his name. But this looked like an old scrubbing brush, and it was A. James. Now he knew his brother, he was Charles James, and his father was John James, but his grandfather had been Anthony James. He didn't remember his grandfather that much. It was a hard life on a farm, and he died when he'd been a young boy. And now James was thinking, my grandfather must have used this, and perhaps I could use it on myself. And he used that old scrubbing brush to try and clean his good Sunday clothes, but there was no use in all of that. No use in any of that, because he was just too muddy and too smelly and too dirty. James pushed his head out of the pig pen. He could see that the sun was shining. He could see that the flowers were waving in the breeze, and they made a sweet smell in the air, as far away from the smell that he had on his skin and his clothes. There was going to be a party. at the church, a Sunday school party. But there wasn't much chance of that happening, not the way that he was. He thought that his brother would be able to go to the Sunday school party. But then, just as he popped his head out of the pig pen, he could hear his brother. His brother, "Oh, Lord, so there you are. What do you think you're doing letting me pig go free? I've no idea where it is." James jumped up and ran out of the pig pen, slipped, tumbled and fell down by the side of the river. Now down by the side of the river there was a path, and there, snuffling for anything that he could find, was his brother's favourite pig. He couldn't believe it. "I'm going to get you!" He knew what he would have to do. He'd have to climb on its back, grab hold of its ears and try and steer it as best as he could and wrestle it back up the hill and back onto the farm. But pig or no pig, it will do just exactly what it wants. And it didn't want to go up and back into the field. It wanted to go down by the side of the river, but with a boy wrestling on the top of its back, it slipped and tripped and fell into the water with a huge and a terrible splash. James was now dirty and very wet, and the pig was enjoying wallowing around by the edge of the river. His brother, who had been so angry when he saw his brother dripping wet, he looked at him and he roared. "If you help me get that pig from out of the river, I'll say nought to a dad. Is that all right?" James couldn't believe it. His brother was going to forgive him, and the two of them, they laughed like they'd never laughed before. They screamed as they'd never screamed before, because trying to get a pig from out of a river is not the easiest thing in the world. But the two of them, they stood at the top of the field with the pig now pushed back into the pig pen. And it was then that the mother and father came out and saw the two of them, soaking wet, dripping and covered in mud. The father looked and said, "What do you think you're doing?" James was going to say, "It was me, I'd let my brothers," but his brother said, No, it's okay. James has been helping me. My pig got away. My pig got away and he helped me to get it out of the river." Out of the river? The father and the mother looked at their two dripping sons. They laughed, all of them, as a family. The church bells started to ring. They might have missed the Sunday school party, but the four of them, they sat down by the side of the river. And that story was told from father to son, from that son to his own son, the day that James helped his brother